Hello and welcome to the next instalment of the ongoing fever dream that I am churlishly calling my life. Today, it begins.
Hello. Hi.
So, I want to develop a video game. That's what I'm studying at school, that's what I enjoy doing. I want to develop a video game. But before one can really get stuck into a project like this, it's customary to first at least do some research and create a kind of project brief. So, I like horror. A bit, sort of. Okay, I tell a lie, I'm not actually huge on most horror, especially not horror games. I prefer more subtle, psychological and atmospheric types of horror, things like Spec Ops: The Line making me feel physically sick with fear and guilt, and the crushing inevitability of Sayori's suicide in Doki Doki Literature Club. Even the creeping dread of the deepest and darkest depths of the ocean in Subnautica. The point is, I like subtle horror that has a much deeper emotional effect on me than a scary monster going boo. I like the Blair Witch Project, the film, not the game, because it's tense and slow-paced and genuinely unnerving at times. What I don't like is horror like the opening to Dead Space 2, where something very violent and gory happens, with a massive orchestral score, and it's fully illuminated so that you can see what's going on. Because that's startling, yeah, absolutely, but I don't feel like it really actually has any effect on me. Compare this.
You're in terrible danger.
To this. Oh, you. Right. I have a flashbang. Go get them. I'm so unhappy right now. The decisions I have made were poor, and it's been a while since I saved. Oh no! Oh! This was entirely unscripted, organic, and at any point, the alien could have come around the table and found me. And all I could do was sit quietly and hope that it didn't. Now, admittedly, the game I want to create leans more on the side of an atmospheric puzzle game than actual horror, but I'll explain all that in due time. Actually, now is probably due time, isn't it? Alright, let's look at the brief, and then we can take a look at some inspiration and get started.
Hello. Hi.
I want to create a small, self-contained experience a couple of hours long that tells a short but unsettling story throughout. I do actually have full ideas and even a few voice bites that I want to play around with, but that's neither here nor there. I don't want to spoil the story, so these devlogs are all going to centre around building the rooms and core gameplay. It takes place in Eastern Europe in the late 1800s to early 1900s, and will be largely based around exploring your environment, solving puzzles, and trying to escape the rooms that you're in. I like the idea of building it out to a few rooms, but that's if I have the time or resources, and we'll see about that. So, I've taken inspiration from a couple of places. The first thing I wanted to look at was how different games build atmosphere and tension, so to that end I looked at Five Nights at Freddy's and Alien Isolation, because they're incredibly tense games. Also, yeah, that is why I randomly uploaded a highlight reel of Alien Isolation the other day. I was trying to make this video and got distracted. Oh, it started raining. So, how do these games build tension? Well, two things: sound design and fear of the unknown. FNAF starts you off pinned to your seat, unable to move or escape. You look at the cameras and you can see 3 animatronics on the stage. After a little while you tab back to the main stage and one of them's gone. And this is part of a short arc, in fact it's the instigating starting point of a short arc that makes up the core horror of FNAF. So you don't know where the funny rabbit is. You start tabbing to different cameras. For every camera that you tab to where you don't find it, you're getting more and more tense, because the further it is from the main stage, the closer it is to you. So the tension is rising and rising, and eventually one of two things will happen. Either you find the funny rabbit on the cameras and the tension eases off a little, but not fully. It's never going to ease off fully while the animatronics aren't on the main stage because you're still in danger. Or, worse, you don't find Mr. Snuggles on the cameras and desperately flick away from your screen hoping that you're not too late. And this is where the tension is at its greatest. It's had a very long time to build and you're in a lot of danger. You flick the light switch and either, there he is, slam the door down and you're safe, or you press the light switch and just get a little... which is really effective as audio bites go, because this tiny little click means only one thing. You're already dead. Boo, jump scare, the tension is broken. Now, this cycle is really effective, but loses impact quickly. I attribute that mostly to the fact that it never changes, so everything becomes much more predictable. But in the first couple of hours, the atmosphere is top-notch. In fact, the atmosphere is always top-notch in FNAF games, but the repetition of wait for thing to happen, boo thing happen, wears quickly. Alien Isolation also builds tension really, really well and is one of my favourite horror games of all time. It has a long, slow period of build-up as you explore an area, and then the alien is dropped in and you have to keep exploring and progressing while working around it. However, in my experience, it's scarier to not really know where the alien is, because it could be right around this next corner or somewhere else entirely, but you don't know. The consistent thing between these two games is the sound design. In Alien, you have the creaking of the ship, the thumping of the vents, and the heavy, leathery footsteps of the xenomorph stomping around. Quite often you can use those footsteps to figure out where the alien is. In FNAF, you've got the kind of churning ambience, the mechanical sound of the fan, footsteps, and other little audio bites on the periphery of your hearing. How do you build tension in an atmospheric horror game? Good sound is going to be a big factor in it. But that's actually something for much later on, because before we figure out how to make it scary, first we need something to make scary. So we're going to look at environment and gameplay. Now, rather conveniently, there are a couple of games which have basically what I'm looking for in these two departments. Between Resident Evil 7 and 8, there sort of lies my perfect horror game. Resident Evil 7 has a tight scope, the focus on survival horror, a fairly decent story and solidly interwoven explorative gameplay, and Resident Evil 8 has a big castle. Now, I'm kind of just going to smash these together, seeing as mine takes place in a big castle somewhere in Eastern Europe, but I only want it to take place inside the castle and have some nice exploration and puzzles. So, I may have spent an hour or so playing Resident Evil 8 just so that I could get to the bit in the castle, only to take 44 screenshots of the rooms. Incidentally, when one is having hooks punched through one's hands to be strung up by vampire ladies, one's thoughts should not be, "I simply love what you've done with the soft furnishings, darling." Regardless, I now have a bunch of reference images for the type of environments and sets I want to build, and that's going to be the first thing we get on with. But there's one last thing I want to look at for inspiration, and that's the core gameplay loop of puzzle solving and exploring the environment. For that, I want to look at Resident Evil 7, because it's the one I actually got footage of. The footage on screen is only the first bit of RE7, but it applies to the full game too. You start off exploring an environment with a bunch of things you can see and interact with, but only one way to progress. You do a key event which unlocks the way forward. After going forward, you find yourself in a new area where you explore and find more stuff to use in gameplay, before unlocking a shortcut which makes exploring the entire place easier and allows you to go back to the first area with the stuff that you got later on. This means you can explore this area in more detail and open up things that you couldn't before. It's a very simple core loop, but a very effective one, which I'd like to have a go at recreating.
Hello?
First things first is going to be building a room to start in, and then from there we can build up some mechanics such as interacting with objects and key events to trigger room changes, so that's what I'll work on. And then at the end of the next devlog we can have more of a discussion about level design and layout, as well as how I'm going to implement one of the core mechanics, which is something I've intentionally not mentioned in this video. So we'll get to that. Thank you for watching. This was just an introduction part. The next one will be more substantial. Thanks for watching, and